I want them to die, I want to climb up, I want to climb to the top step by step by step. Zodaj wants to tell everyone, I am not called Zodalu. To make you paralyzed, I crossed over to you, a dead eunuch, and listened to your nagging, eat shit. The remnants in my mind seemed to stop for a moment, and then came out like a storm again. I want them to die, Wang Lu, Wang Bing, Du Jing, Shui Gairan. None of them can be let go. I want power, I want power, I want to climb to the highest point step by step by step, tell others, my name is Zodaikai. From now on, my words will be the way of the capital. Zodaj was directly blown by the last obsession of this body. Okay, I promise you, I will definitely avenge you. Pausing for a moment, I don't know if Zodaj's words had an effect, or if the original owner's only lingering remnant came to an end. In short, the suffocating curse is no longer in my mind. Zodaj began to relieve the memory of the original owner, and the memory fragments turned into torrents, impacting his mind. The body memory gradually merged with Zodaj, who had traveled through time, and he could empathize with the other party's emotions. Aggrieved, depressed, resentful and cruel killing intent. Zodaj sighed deeply, his situation is a bit not good. Frowning, he looked at the Hanyuan hall, which was close at hand. Hearing the melodious music coming from inside, Zodaikai felt even more aggrieved. The original owner is also really stupid. It is really stupid to be at Tsingyi in the capital instead of going with the prince to study with the prince. What's even more outrageous is that this guy used to be the companion of the youngest prince in the palace, relying on his ferromagnetic relationship with the 9 princes. He almost offended all the eunuchs in the palace who could be offended. Just now, while rehearsing a big play in front of the emperor, he accidentally broke the emperor's blue and white porcelain vase. Fortunately, the original owner did not admit his mistake to the emperor, but instead remained silent. The emperor was furious and asked him to go out and kneel. This kneeling lasted for 1 day, from the dawn of the morning to when the moon was half out, nearly 20 hours. The original owner just knelt down to death. Good guy, Zodaj won't be able to fix it. I don't know how many lifetimes of misfortune I have suffered by directly transmigrating into such a bad boy. Zodaikai's eyes showed confusion, not to mention running with a bucket. Even if he moved a little, 2 eunuchs would stare at him, and his completely unconscious lower limbs told him that if he knelt like this again, he would die twice. It was the turn of autumn and summer, and it was rainy in Kyoto. It had been a day of heavy rain and the sky was rendered grey. The dense raindrops were like fine needles and threads, smashed on the peculiarly shaped eaves of Hanyuan Hall, and then fell to the ground, turning into a drop in the long river. Zodaj listened to the music coming from the hall, and watched the dense rain fall on the ground and splash countless water. Just when Zodaj was about to muster up his strength, he was about to drag his stiff legs and crawl into the hall to let the emperor kill him quickly, so as not to affect his next crossing. And wearing a purple-white crane robe came out from inside, and then went straight to Zodaj. Zodalu, you didn't expect you to have today, did you? The slap you slapped our family back then will never be forgotten in our life. Today is the first time. In the future, there will be many more days like this, so you just slow down. Take it easy. The name Zodalu is actually not the name of the original owner, but he just entered the palace when he was young and was bullied by others. An old said that his name was not good, and the road was too strange, so he would inevitably make mistakes, so he changed his name to Zodalu. Even though the original owner is unwilling, but it has been recorded in the book, there is no other way. Zodaj looked up at the who was mocking in his ear, and based on what he remembered, he recognized who this person was. Wang Lu, godson of Wang Bing in the royal study room, seemed to be bullying the original owner. Later, the 9th prince found out and took him back to beat him. He is indeed an eunuch, and he really holds a grudge. Zodaikai thought up to this point, and was about to retort in order to die quickly, but at this moment, the life script game is on. The current scene automatically generates the script Leng Gong. 1. Your current status is supporting role. Act 1 main quest generated. Surprise suddenly appeared in Zhou Daokai's eyes. This is Gold Finger? Survival from a desperate situation. Although he got the golden finger, he didn't check it. After all, Wang Lu was still in front of him. What if the golden finger was too long and scared Wang Lu? When his eyes moved to Wang Lu, Zhou Dodge noticed that there seemed to be a very strange mark on Wang Lu's head. With a thought in his mind, an invisible mouse touched the sign, and a strange interface appeared in front of his eyes. Name, Wang Lu. Status, supporting role in the script of Leng Gong. Achievements of supporting roles, Grand Duke Chitos, official position, Grand Master Sunflower, martial arts, founder of Ziwan. The first scene plot, Wang Lu is the son of Wang Binji. In the winter of the 15th year of Yuanji, there is no snow in the north. The 3 prefectures of Bailiang, Bayan and Ningguo are rioting, and refugees are flooding. Snow. The imperial court sent envoys to check, and Wang Lu accompanied them. Just after the envoys arrived in Baidi, it was snowing heavily in Baidi. Wang Lu was overwhelmed with surprise, and hurried back to Kyoto overnight to report to Emperor Yuanji and Baidi Ruxu. Wang Lu was anxious to report auspiciousness and passed Wang Bing. Wang Bing thought him a betrayal and demoted him to the cold palace. The second act of the plot, check the script in advance, need to consume life, the panel unfolded, and Zhou Dodge quickly looked at Wang Lu. Wang Lu didn't seem to have seen the panel in front of Zhou Daokai at all. Seeing Zhou Daokai looking at him, he bent slightly. Zhou Dalu, I heard that the 9th prince gave you a lot of money before he left Beijing. If you are willing to contribute to our family, maybe our family can give you a good time. Zhou Dodge didn't care what he said, but just confirmed that Wang Lu couldn't see the panel in front of him, then lowered his head again, and opened his own panel without saying a word. Player, left Dodger's status, Leng Gong script supporting role, free, the main task of the first act, make friends with a noble person, restricted to people within the script of the Cold Palace. Reminder, the script of the Cold Palace is opened. Once you enter the palace gate, it is as deep as the sea. The darkness of the palace is far beyond the imagination of outsiders. As a young eunuch, you reading www.yuyugonshu.com. Any words and deeds may cost you your life, please choose carefully who you associate with. Current script permissions, 3, you can view the scripts of the 3 NPCs in Leng Gong. Lifespan, 1 year and 3 months. Seeing the lifespan in the last column, the excitement in Zhou Dodge's eyes suddenly collapsed. This body is only 15 years old, and there is only 1 year left to live? You can live to be 16 if you co-author it, right? Then why don't you go with the 9th prince? No matter how weak the 9th prince is, he can't live long, at least he can outlive you, right? Idiot! Zhou Dalu, our family is talking to you. A gloomy voice woke up Zhou Daokai. Hey, if you don't give this guy 3 melons, this guy won't let him go. Forget it, he will spend money and avoid disaster for his dead body. Immediately, he took out a few taels of silver from his waist and put it in Wang Lu's hands. Eunuch Wang, this is my salary for a few months, please be merciful. Wang Lu took the broken silver and finally left. He also knew that the 9th prince's gift to Zhou Dodge before he left was probably groundless, and it would be good to scrape off a few taels of silver. Zhou Dodge's voice was real, but the coldness revealed in his eyes made people understand that this matter would not just be left alone. It's just that the most important thing now is to complete the game mission. Maybe completing the mission can also solve the problem of lifespan. The nobleman in the cold palace. A thoughtful expression appeared on Zhou Daokai's face. It has been more than 300 years since the founding of the Jin dynasty, and he has not heard of any nobles who have come out of the cold palace. Is there really nothing wrong with this game? Also, how should I go to the cold palace? He slowly raised his head and looked at the Hanyuan hall where the door was closed and the sound was coming. I have to confess to the emperor and let him relegate himself to the cold palace. Zhou Dodge was about to get up when he saw the door of the main hall open again. The leader was a handsome middle-aged man wearing a bright yellow dragon robe and a goatee. The blood on his face had already been emptied by the color of wine, and he looked a little pale at this moment. Unusual flushing. Behind them were several eunuchs in red clothes. The head Zodiakai also knew him. Naturally it was Wang Bing, one of the most famous eunuchs in the royal study room. As the emperor walked out of the hall, several of his wife quickly ran out first, preparing umbrellas and sedan chairs as quickly as possible. No one looked at Zhou Dodge, as if he was just a piece of dispensable air. Whether he was alive or dead, it had no effect. Zodiakai was about to speak when he heard Wang Bing report to the emperor, "Saint, what should we do with Xiao Luzi? Shall he be put in prison?" Emperor Yuanji was non-committal, so he shifted his gaze to Zodiakai, then lock him in, and release him after Zhu enters Beijing. Zodiakai was shocked, and looked at Wang Bing with murderous intent in his eyes. This old man wanted to kill himself by putting himself in prison. In a place like a prison, death is nothing, so you must never go to a prison. Zodiakai carefully observed Emperor Yuanji's expression, and knew that it was because of the ninth prince that he didn't kill himself, so he quickly said, "Grace of the saint, I know that I have sinned a lot, and I am willing to go to the cold palace to punish myself." A flash of surprise flashed in Emperor Yuanji's eyes. Zodiakai saw that there was something going on, and continued, "I heard that the cold palace is lonely, and I have never been taught by a virtuous person. After a long time, the abandoned concubines must be more resentful towards the saint. The younger one is willing to go for the saint, for the abandoned concubine, the old prince, etc." Singing the new drama arranged by the sage, so that they can understand the greatness of the sage. The emperor loves plays, not only likes to listen to plays, but also likes to write new plays by himself, and even gave himself the nickname of Ji Tianxia. Zodiakai's words spoke to Emperor Yuanji's heart. In his heart, apart from abolishing slavery in the Jin dynasty when he was young, he also made several world-famous dramas in recent years, which made him always proud. Although Emperor Yuanji was even more surprised, he didn't want to know what I was thinking at all, so he stepped on Wang Bing's shoulder and boarded the sedan chair. "Okay, since you have such thoughts, then I agree. Thank you, Saint." Zhou Dodge had excitement in his eyes, but his face was neither humble nor overbearing, neither flattered nor humiliated. The emperor got on the sedan chair and left. The whole Hanyuan palace fell into complete silence. Zodiakai still knelt there, but there were two more eunuchs behind him. Watching the emperor walk out of the compound where the Hanyuan palace is located, the two eunuchs behind him immediately put Zodiakai in the middle, dragging Zodiakai like a dead dog, and walked out in the rain. Lenggong is in the most remote corner of the palace. The road is not close. It has been dragged through several halls. The ground is slippery, and Zhou Dodge's trousers were worn out with two huge holes, and traces of blood flowed from his knees, oozing from the wound. "Xiao Luzi, you have to remember, our brothers sent you to the cold palace, don't forget your kindness in the future." The on the left is a little older, but the gloomy eyes seem to have become the eunuch's time became longer and more intense, and he didn't mind adding insult to injury. After all, what change can a who has been thrown into the cold palace make? Another young had already started a body search directly. The is physically disabled and has the darkest psychology. Greed for money and love of power are the common denominators of all eunuchs. Zhou Dodge didn't say a word, his numb knees could no longer feel the pain, he just lowered his head with cold eyes. All his money was given to Wang Lu, so the two naturally got nothing. When they came to the Lang Palace, the two threw Zodiakai into the puddle, then hurried inside to report to the chief here. The manager was non-committal, but just replied, "If the saint's porcelain is broken, then let him get drenched in the rain." The two young eunuchs looked respectful, even though the old man in front of them was just the most powerless in the palace. Only the people in the palace understand that the eunuchs in the cold palace are the most incapable of gaining power, because they endure loneliness and neglect all the year round. Their viciousness and tyranny are far better than ordinary eunuchs. Boss Su, Zhou Delu offended Boss Wang. The little who searched reminded him in a low voice. The manager nodded and said nothing. Zhou Dodge lay numb in the muddy puddle on the side of the road, like a wriggling maggot. Looking at the handsome face emerging from the middle of the water, this is the beauty of beating eunuchs big and small in the palace, otherwise he would not be valued by the emperor and become the pillar of the theatre troupe. But he didn't feel a little bit happy, after all, he was a eunuch. On the 15th day of that year, I didn't even have the qualifications to stand. Zhou Dodge put aside distracting thoughts and studied his golden finger. I have seen Wang Lu's future plot before, which is only part of the function of the golden finger. View the character script, but you can only view the plot of the characters in the Lenggong script, such as the Emperor and Wang Bing are not people in the Lenggong script, so he can't see it. Open Wang Lu's script panel again. Watch carefully. In the end, his eyes stayed on the column of Wang Lu's achievements. I skipped the official position and so on, and fixed my eyes on the Sunflower Grandmaster, Budeo. I learned from the memory of the original owner before that there is extraordinary power in this world, but I didn't care about it just now. Seeing Wang Lu's panel at this moment, Zhou Daikai seemed to realize something. Unconsciously, his finger touched the words Sunflower Grandmaster. A picture suddenly appeared in front of my eyes. A tall figure wearing a crimson glazed panlong suit and holding a golden needle in his hand stood in the same place. Behind him was the abandoned land that had been razed for dozens of miles. Countless creatures crawled under his feet. From bottom to top, he kept stepping into the air and go. Turning around suddenly, his face became clear, it was Wang Lu. Zhou Daikai's pupils constricted, is this the martial arts master? So scary. Thinking about the scene of annihilation that he saw, the Grand Master took action, and the damage caused was comparable to a catastrophe in the natural world. I want to be such a strong man too. Zhou Dodge had this thought in his mind. His eyes flickered, and he clicked on the achievements in Wang Lu's achievement column one by one. One picture after another unfolded before his eyes. There is a red-clothed panlong named Dajin Qiantui Gong, and the party kills dissidents. There are Ziwan military uniforms, followed by countless eunuchs, riding tall horses, showing off their might. Zhou Dodge was a little crazy unconsciously. I don't know if it's the obsession of the original owner that hasn't dissipated again, or Zhou Dodge's thoughts at the moment. This should be like this. It must be replaced. I don't know if this Wang Lu is considered a nobleman in the Cold Palace. But Zhou Daikai will never defect to Wang Lu unless he is on a dead end. However, martial arts masters have hundreds of years of lifespan. It seems that practice can increase lifespan. He became very interested in the extraordinary power of Dajin. Zhou Dodge calmed down his breath and felt that the numbness of his legs had almost dissipated, so he staggered up from the rain and walked into the Cold Palace garden. The Leng Palace actually has a name. It is called Jingdan Palace, and it is usually the place where the emperor of the Jin dynasty imprisoned the concubines who made mistakes. It is lonely here all day long, and many concubines and nobles have died. The area is not too small, and there are 27 gardens in total. Zhou Daikai came to the entrance of the main hall, squeezed the rainwater off his body, pulled his pants to cover the big hole, and then said at the door, "Little Zhou Delu, come to Lenggong to report." A cold and sharp voice came out, like a piercing cold knife piercing through the heart. "Come in." Zhou Dodge walked into the main hall with a low eyebrow. In the hall, sat an old in his 50s, hunched over, lighting the candles in the hall with his own hands. His eyebrows were white, his face was a little long, and he already had many age spots. He glanced at Zhou Dodge and continued with the work at hand. "You are Xiao Luzi? Su Qing, the head of our Cold Palace, you came at the right time." The old lady in Swamiwan died a while ago, so you can go over. Zodayakai heaved a sigh of relief when he heard that he was going to the 27 garden to take care of the nobleman. As eunuchs in the Lang Palace, there is a distinction between high and low. The patrolling is the most proud. They can enter and leave the Lang Palace at any time. Although this security garden is the last location of the Imperial Palace, it is close to Jingmen Gate of the palace, but there are full-time Habayashi guards on duty, and generally no one can go in and out. Royal Ziwan, where generals and princes hunt all the year round. The security garden is on duty, so I have to go to help. And someone always shoots the arrow in the wrong direction. Zodayakai is just an ordinary person, and now he just wants to hang out, so he doesn't mind being assigned to serve people in Swime Garden. My little one, thank you for your order. He took out a few banknotes that he had taken out of his underwear before, and put them on Su Qing's desk. The little one is helpless in the Jingdan Palace, and everything is willing to obey the orders of the great commander. A smile finally appeared on Su Qing's ravine old face, and his tone was a little kind. Go, concubine Wangui has a good temper, take good care of her. Xiao Dezi, take Xiao Luzi to Swime Garden. Just looking at Zodayakai and Xiao Dezi's leaving back, he sneered in his heart, he's a smart man, unfortunately. Concubine Wangui is different from ordinary concubines in the cold palace, she has a natal family. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. He didn't know how the old nanny in Swamiwan died before, but the old nanny had insulted the princess born to concubine Wangui and died a few days later. If there was no connection between the two, I wouldn't believe it no matter what. After all, since concubine Wangui entered the Jingdan Palace, Swamiwan had the most palace maids and eunuchs who died. Zodayakai walked out of the main hall, only to remember who this concubine Wangui was. The most favored concubine from the 3rd year of Yuanji to the 5th year of Yuanji, she gave birth to a daughter for the current emperor, but the princess was not yet crowned at the age of 5. Curse, was put into limbo by Emperor Yuanji. As the child of the witch, the princess was naturally involved. It would be good if it was concubine Wangui. In the past, when the 9th prince was here, he even took him to have dinner with concubine Wangui. Xiao Dezi walked on the cold road with Zodaj. The rain had stopped at some point, and the autumn wind came, bringing a chill. Left Dodge shuddered. Xiao Dezi is very young, he looks only 13 or 14 years old, but he still doesn't understand what he has lost as an eunuch, and the darkness in his heart has not yet fully grown. Grandpa Zo, let's hurry up, Swamiwan is very warm. This is the first person who showed kindness to him since Zodaj crossed, which made him feel a little strange. He was affected by the mentality of the original owner, and resentment piled up in his heart, and darkness abounded. 10 minutes later, the two arrived at Swime Garden. It's really just a small courtyard with a small 2-story building inside, which is where concubine Wangui usually lives. Perhaps it was because concubine Wangui had been favored too much, the environment of Swime Garden was considered good among the 27 gardens of Jingdan Palace. Eunuch Zo, this is the place, I'll go and tell concubine Wangui. Thank you, Eunuch Li. Zodayakai walked into the small building, but he didn't see concubine Wangui, the owner of Swime Garden, only a little girl about 13 or 14 years old squatting at the door to play with water. The little girl has white skin and rosy cheeks, but she is a little thin, but she is a beauty at first glance. It's just a little thin, and it's true when you think about it. The cold palace is the place where the harem suffers. How can it satisfy the nutrition that a little girl needs to grow up? Are you the new little who came to serve my mother and concubine? You're so pretty. Zodayakai understood that the rose in front of him was the princess born to concubine Wangui, and bowed his head slightly to show respect. The minister has seen the princess before. When the little girl heard Zodaj's words, her cheeks turned red for an instant, and she pulled her 2 hands out of the water, shaking them at the same time and said, I'm not a princess, don't talk nonsense. Zodaj was taken aback for a moment, and took a deep look at the little girl. It seems that the little girl was bullied in the cold palace. Suddenly, I remembered my main storyline, this Wang Guifei mother and daughter. Do you know if they meet the standard of a noble person in the cold palace? The authority was used 3 times, and it was used once on Wang Lu, so the second time it was used on this little lowly in front of him. Name, Ji Lingshu, protagonist of the script of Lenggong Achievements of the main character, the Empress of the Jin Dynasty, the Grand Master of Lingyu, martial arts, the founder of equal rights for men and women. The first scene plot, Ji Lingshu entered the cold palace at the age of 3 and was bullied. At the age of 14, he was taught martial arts by the Wang Lu. In just 3 months, he had reached the 8th rank. Later, he was in the Ziwan Great Hunt, and Ji Lingshu mixed in. Wanting to hunt for his mother and satisfy his own consumption of martial arts, was seen by Emperor Yuanji, Feng Ziwan Princess. Concubine Wang Gui also came out of the cold palace again. The second act of the plot, check the script in advance, need to consume life, left Dodge was silent. Hiss, this radish is so terrifying, it has the qualifications of a great emperor. After a long time, he finally spoke, the respect in his expression was no longer perfunctory, but extremely solemn. How old is the princess? He swore that it was really because of his main mission that he respected the little lowly in front of him so much. Seeing that Zhou Daikai still called herself a princess, Ji Lingshu's expression changed. I've already told you, don't call me a princess. But you didn't tell me your name. It was Ji Lingshu's turn to be silent, and said dryly, my name is Ji Lingshu, and I am 12 years old. Zhou Dodge was about to say something when a female voice as gentle as jade and extremely gentle interrupted their conversation. This is the new eunuch Zhou, right? Lingshu, come in quickly. It was concubine Wang Gui's voice, Zhou Dodge recalled. He followed Ji Lingshu into the small building, and then he was stunned. Although he had a memory and knew the amazing appearance of this concubine Wang Gui, but seeing him now, he still couldn't help but stay in a daze on the spot. At the moment when he saw concubine Wang Gui with his own eyes, he finally understood why the ancient Chinese used to describe a beauty as sinking fish and falling geese. She has already given birth to a child, and she is almost 30, how could she still? No, the blessing of these 2 attributes seems to be more attractive. Zhou Daikai, who knew the achievements of concubine Wang Gui's daughter, used the self-control that ordinary people can hardly possess, to look away. The little Zhou Daikai has seen concubine Wang Gui. Get up, I'm no longer Wang Guifei. Wang Guifei had a graceful posture, with a wry smile from the corner of her mouth. Zhou Daikai couldn't help but take care of her in his arms. Zhou Daikai raised his head, but he didn't meet the imperial concubine's eyes, he just looked at her chest. In my little eyes, the imperial concubine will always be the imperial concubine, and it hasn't changed in a single day. This gesture is very appropriate. At least, Zhou Dodge's physical appearance is really resistant. Eunuch Zhou speaks really nicely, come to my room quickly. The imperial concubine said as she was about to get up. He followed concubine Wang Gui very faithfully, smelling the milky scent from the mature woman. He actually had a somewhat unreal feeling. The room that concubine Wang Gui arranged for him was not too small, and it was obvious that she respected him a lot. After all, the eunuchs in the Lenggong also have another duty, which is to monitor the concubines in the harem, so some eunuchs who have no hope of promotion are still happy to serve the concubines in the Lenggong. There are many benefits, one is to extort money, the other is to take care of the concubine, and the third is to serve. This service, the benevolent sees the benevolent and the wise sees wisdom. But for Zhou Dodge, these are all false. He has only one thought now, to serve Wang Guifei's mother and daughter well. 2 women, one big and one small. Although he was a little curious about the fairness and beauty of the 2 in such a cold palace, he didn't care. After all, the key now was to make them trust him. Suddenly, he remembered something. Really have? A hazy memory came to his mind. In the clean room, a conversation between two eunuchs in red robes. This kid is a eunuch. That's true, is it still cut? Don't cut it. When the time comes, the manager will ask you and I will have no good fruit. Zhou Dodge recalled these and counted again. All there. Just now it seems that there is still a feeling, not a scrap product. He searched the memory of the original owner, and it seemed that there was such a thing as a wild boar eating eggs, but it was recovered now. Could it be because of Goldfinger? This golden finger is just like him. Hiss, it seems that I can serve concubine Wang Gui better, I don't know which tune she likes. Abandoning these distracting thoughts, Zhou Dodge's mind returned to himself. As the memory continued to ruminate and chew, he became more and more familiar with the world. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Dijin is the most powerful country on this continent, similar to the ancient Han. The only difference from ancient China is that there is an extraordinary existence. The scene of Wang Lu's future achievements that almost destroyed the world made him fascinated. There are martial arts masters who turn the world upside down, immortal monks riding the wind with their swords, Buddhist monks who move mountains with their fingers, and even supernatural beings and evildoers. Dijin was able to establish a country for 300 years, and the hidden power is really not small. Where should one obtain martial arts skills? He is very eager to obtain the cultivation method now. After all, if he becomes a master, he will have hundreds of years to live. Zhou Dodge frowned. You can watch other people's next scene by spending your life. Gritting his teeth, he took a look at his lifespan of more than a year. I have roots, so what's the use of this lifespan? Most of the adventures of the little princess are not suitable for me, so I can only gamble with the Duke of Jin and Qian Toes. Zhou Dodge's lifespan column was quickly reduced by 1, leaving only 3 months to live. Wang Lu's panel was illusory for a moment, and then quickly solidified. The second scene, Wang Lu fell into the cold palace, and the hatred towards Wang Bing reached the extreme in his heart, but he dared not take revenge. Thinking of the beautiful appearance of concubine Wang Gui in the past, although he had no roots, he still had a lustful nature, so he spent a lot of money to come here. Swamiwan, when she was insulting concubine Wang Gui once, she noticed something strange under the bed. She searched but found nothing. Another 3 days later, on the night of the full moon, Wang Lu finally discovered the clue, and began to practice martial arts hidden in the cold palace. The third act, check the script in advance, need to consume life, out. Still a blast. As expected of Lord Qiantui, Zhou Daikai was extremely grateful to Wang Lu at this moment. Good man. Early the next morning, Zhou Dodge got up early and worked hard to tidy up Swimmay Garden. When concubine Wang Gui woke up, seeing this scene, her eyes turned red for an instant. After she went deep into the Lang Palace, she did all these things herself. In the past, when eunuchs and maids came to Swimmay Garden, they all blackmailed her money and bullied Xiao Ling Shu, only Zhou Dodge came to work sincerely. Eunuch Zhou got up really early, let Ling Shu do these things in the future. As soon as Zhou Daikai heard this, he knew that he was safe, so he did not waste his time getting up early this morning, and swiped his favorability in front of concubine Wang Gui. The noble concubine is being polite. The little one said that in the eyes of the little one, the noble concubine will always be a noble concubine. Concubine Wang Gui stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder. Okay, good boy, don't do it, come and chat with me. As he spoke, he took his hand and walked to the chair beside him. Feeling the weak and boneless jade hands, Zhou Daikai's heart felt rippling again. It's unimaginable that concubine Wang Gui, who is so beautiful, was thrown into the cold palace by Emperor Yuanji. This dog emperor. The two sat on the chair. Zhou Daikai grabbed concubine Wang Gui's hand with his backhand. Concubine Wang Gui twitched slightly, but did not move away, and looking at Zhou Daikai, who had been at a young age, his heart burst into pity, but not much say what, let Zhou Dodge pull. Zhou Dodge really didn't mean it, he just forgot. At what age did eunuch Zhou enter the palace? Concubine Wangui asked. In terms of Empress, the youngest entered the palace at the age of 4, and was accompanied by the 9th prince a few years ago, and even went to find Empress for dinner with him. This made concubine Wangui think of her past glory, and her eyes turned red again. Only then did Zhou Deakai realize that he had been holding concubine Wangui's hand, but he was reluctant to let go, so he squeezed it calmly. A blush flashed across concubine Wangui's face. Then how did you come to be in the cold palace? Speaking of this, Zhou Deakai couldn't help feeling aggrieved in his heart. The original owner's stupidity made him a little unable to speak. In recent years, the sage has been obsessed with opera. The little one made Tsing Yi, and accidentally broke the sage's vase. As he spoke, Zhou Dodge couldn't help but shed tears. Grass. When will this obsession with the body die? I don't want to cry. Unexpectedly, the emotional outpouring of this body actually inspired concubine Wangui's motherhood. Holding Zhou Deakai's hand, she actually took Zhou Deakai's thin body into her arms. I don't know if it's a show of true feelings or a fake bribe, but Zhou Dodge thinks it's true anyway. Zhou Deakai's physical development was slow, he was still very thin at the age of 15, and looked like a child. Concubine Wangui couldn't help but think of her own daughter, and couldn't help loving Zhou Deakai. We are all poor people, haven't you asked Zhou Gonggong's name? The little one was originally named Zhou Deakai, but when he entered the palace, Zhou Dalul was added to the roster. Zhou Deakai is extremely upright. Since he decided to lick, he should first put his own handle in the hands of concubine Wangui. The roster record is different from his own name. This kind of thing can be big or small, it all depends on how others handle it. Concubine Wangui patted Zhou Dodge on the back lightly. Then I'll call you Dalu. Don't just tell people your name that is different from the roster, or else people will hear it and don't know how to deal with you. You have to know that there are a lot of things going on in the palace with people's hearts separated. The young one naturally knows, but when I saw the Empress, I remembered my mother who was vague in my memory, and couldn't help telling the Empress about it. I also hope that the Empress can keep the secret for the young one. Concubine Wangui let go of Zhou Deakai. This is not like shaking hands. Zhou Deakai can't just stay in someone's arms. Dalu, you will treat this Swime garden as your home in the future, help me take good care of Lingshu, and if there is a chance, I will help you leave the cold palace. Zhou Dodge lowered his head slightly, yes. Concubine Wangui left, and Zhou Deakai continued to work. Although the atmosphere just now was ambiguous, he knew in his heart that concubine Wangui really deserved to be born as a noble concubine. Even though the method had not been used for more than 10 years, she was still so proficient. Not only did he hold himself, but he also drew a cake for himself. Zhou Deakai was not angry, but very happy. After all, concubine Wangui was willing to control her, and she also wanted to recover herself. While cleaning the windowsill, he looked at concubine Wan's room above him, thinking of the secret hidden in the concubine's room. I sighed in my heart. Haste makes waste. I want the imperial concubine to return to my heart, but also want to obtain the skills, so I can only slowly gain the imperial concubine's trust in this way. Ji Lingshu also came down, and this Luo was the thigh that Zhou Deakai really wanted to hug. It's a pity that her past encounters made her extremely wary of outsiders in Swamiwan. Every time Zhou Deakai approached, the little girl would leave directly without talking to him at all. He couldn't help feeling a little annoyed that when they met for the first time, they shouldn't have called her a princess. If I didn't guess wrong, there must have been eunuchs and maids who used to call Ji Lingshu a princess, and then used this name to make a big fuss and bully the mother and daughter. The young Ji Lingshu probably thought she was that kind of person. It seems that we still have to start with concubine Wangui, and gradually gain the trust of the little lowly, until he becomes a confidant and even a whole body. On the second day, Zhou Dodge gradually passed through the endless cleaning of windows and endless dragging of the ground. The life bar was reduced by another day, which made him feel a sense of urgency. Autumn often comes very suddenly, and the temperature naturally drops sharply. During the day, the sun was shining brightly, and Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com still had a trace of heat, which made Zodaj, who was working, sweat profusely. Who would have thought that there would be a strong wind in the evening, and the temperature would drop sharply? Swamiwan in autumn naturally has no coal consumption. Sitting in the room, the coolness rising from the solace of the feet spreads all over the body, making people shiver uncontrollably. Zodaj went out and poured a basin of water, and couldn't help but sneezed. Some couldn't help but think, if only I could become a rich man through time travel, then there should be a maid to warm the bed at this time, not only warm, but also a woman's fragrance. Warm bed? Warm the bed. Show. Zodaj directly dropped the tub in his hand, and couldn't wait to go upstairs. The opportunity to go upstairs has come. As far as he knew, Lingshu was already grown up and had already slept with concubine Wangui in separate rooms. He is already so cold, and the delicate and soft concubine Wangui must be cold too, so at this time, he is going to warm concubine Wangui's bed. Wouldn't it be possible to enter Wang Guifei's bedroom and win her trust? God help me too. He quietly walked into concubine Wangui's room. The concubine was not there. It seemed that he went to the next door to have a heart-to-heart talk with his daughter. Zodaikai didn't care. Lifting the curtain of the imperial concubine's bed, I saw her limply resting, without the slightest image of the silk covering as imagined. There is only a knot-hick quilt, a thin mattress, and the pillows have already been flattened. This place seems to be worse than Zodaj's bed. Zodaikai sighed in his heart. The concubines in Lenggong are really miserable. He has been bullied by a group of eunuchs and court ladies. He wanted to warm the bed directly, but he left directly, returned to his room, picked up the mattress, quilt and pillows, and spread them on the imperial concubine's couch, then took off his coat with peace of mind, and lay down inside. Warming the bed, should it be like this? The bed was completely warmed up, and Zodaikai, who had been waiting for a long time, finally waited for the noble concubine to come back from Lingshu's room. Concubine Wangui opened the bed curtain and saw that there was a person lying on her bed. She was startled, and was about to exclaim when Zodaikai quickly got up and covered the concubine's mouth with his hand. "My lady is me. The temperature has dropped severely tonight, my little one. I came here specially to warm the Empress bed." Warming the bed. Concubine Wangui's beautiful eyes were filled with astonishment. In this world, it is only heard that a woman warms a man's bed, but no man has ever warmed a woman's bed. Concubine Wangui was about to say something. Zodaikai lost his expression. "I haven't had a mother since I was a child, and the first time I saw my mother, I felt a mother's feeling. I disturbed my mother. I deserve death. I will go to Jingdan Palace to fetch it from Mr. Su." "Fine. No, it's just..." Concubine Wangui's voice was still weak and full of tenderness, and she retracted what she originally wanted to say. "How can I bear to blame Dala for your kindness?" Zodaj smiled honestly. That's good, that's good. By the way, Empress, the quilt has been warmed up now, you should go to bed and rest quickly, my little one will undress you." A trace of unnaturalness flashed across concubine Wangui's face. Even though she knew that Zodaikai was a eunuch, she was once a man after all, and she had never had the experience of being served by a man. "Go down early and rest." Zodaikai saw the expression on the imperial concubine's face, and knew that today had reached the limit, so he quickly put on his coat from the side. "Your Majesty, let's rest earlier." After he left, concubine Wangui took off her clothes, and lay down on the warm bed in obscene clothes, sniffing the scent left by Zodaikai, twisted her legs unnaturally for a moment, and then cursed herself inwardly. Only then did she notice the difference. The couch tonight seemed to be much softer, and the quilt was also much thicker. This reminded her of something, and a smile appeared on her face. What Zodayakai didn't know was that this cold palace was located in a remote place, with the west garden outside, dense forests, cold and humid all year round. The imperial concubine suffered from insomnia every season, which was the reason why she didn't reprimand Zodayakai. After all, she was an imperial concubine in the past, and she was an imperial concubine who almost touched the back seat. She was extremely honored and favored. How could she allow a who was once a man to warm her bed? Zodaj returned to the room and got into bed directly. It was really too cold tonight. Concubine Wangui's quilt was very fragrant, and she was covered by a big beauty all the year round, so she naturally had an indescribably charming feeling. Zodayakai felt that an 18-centimeter thing was constantly playing around in the quilt. Involuntarily buried his head in the quilt, took 2 deep breaths. She didn't get angry at warming the imperial concubine's bed today, but if she wants to go tomorrow, she can get used to it. There will be a full moon night in 3 days. The exercises. Zodaj sighed faintly. Immediately, the pain in the knees of his legs made him unable to help but twitch the corners of his mouth. After kneeling for a whole day yesterday, he was able to get out of bed and work today because of his perseverance. This will cause chills and make him sweat profusely in pain. Slightly got up, looked at the bruised knee, Zodaj sighed again. He was able to fall asleep last night, but because he was too tired, his legs hurt tonight, which really made him unable to sleep. Speechless all night. Today is the 3rd day of Zodaj's crossing, and the pain in his knee lets him know at any time that this is not a dream. I still get up early to clean the house and then cook. The meal in Lenggong yesterday was very simple, 2 steamed buns, 1 plate of pickles, nothing more. He was busy chatting with concubine Wangui at that time. Ji Lingshu had already prepared something to eat, and today he planned to spend some extravagant time. After all, his thigh would be both an emperor and a great master in the future, so he would definitely have enough to eat when he was a child. Extravagantly took out a Chinese cabbage and 2 carrots from the vegetable cellar. There is no oil in Swamiwan, and even water needs to be fetched from an ancient well tens of meters away. For Ji Lingshu, Zodayakai didn't lick him all the way like he did for concubine Wangui, but had another plan. Lingshu. Ji Lingshu poked his little head in from the door to look at him, but just looked at him like that, without saying a word. Go, get a bucket of water. Zodaj said in a commanding tone. Seeing him turn around, Ji Lingshu made a face at him, picked up a bucket from the ground and went out to fetch water. With his back turned to her face, Zodaj flashed a strange expression. Last night he couldn't sleep because of the pain in his leg. He thought about how to face the imperial concubine, mother and daughter all night. I don't know if the effect of this implementation is good or not. Ji Lingshu was used to fetching water for her mother, and soon came back with a bucket. But he didn't dare to get close to Zodaj, he just put down the bucket from a distance and left. Zodayakai could also tell that this girl disliked him, or rather his status as a eunuch. Probably because she was bullied too much by eunuchs when she was growing up. In fact, he was also a little curious. This cold palace is in the middle of nowhere. Why do eunuchs and maids dare to bully concubines, princesses and princes at will? Could it be true that no one has ever told that Emperor Yuanji? Zodayakai opened a large pot of stewed radish with cabbage, whether it was salt or oil, and immediately, a strong vegetable fragrance wafted from Swame garden. Greet concubine Wangui and Ji Lingshu over for dinner. Dalu, you. Concubine Wangui felt distressed. All the gardens of the Lang Palace are useful, and compared to the expenditure once every 10 days, the Lang Palace spends once every 3 months, and there are very few dishes or staple foods. This dish was only delivered last month. Concubine Wangui naturally felt very distressed because Zodayakai was so extravagant. Zodayakai took a look at her anxiously radiant cheeks, couldn't help but look twice more, and then said, Your Majesty, don't worry, since you are the young one serving Your Majesty's mother and daughter, there will never be any less madam, don't worry, the 9th prince gave me some money before he left, and I will go and ask Director Su to buy more." Concubine Wang Gui sighed. Ji Lingshu looked excited. The strong oily smell of these dishes and the color of the food itself made her swallow her saliva. In the past, cabbage and radishes were made into pickles by concubine Wang Gui. This method of cooking and stewing directly was rare, and it was better before. This kind of stew seems to be on her 10th birthday. Zhou Daikai first filled a bowl for concubine Wang Gui. "Young lady is incompetent, please feel wronged first." Concubine Wang Gui's beautiful eyes turned red. She is considered a very strong woman, otherwise she would not have been thrown into the cold palace for 10 years, and she has not become crazy yet. Zhou Daikai's concern really made her feel a kind of kindness that she hasn't had for a long time. He spoke softly, but stopped talking. Zhou Dodge didn't care about it, he just filled a bowl for Ji Lingshu again. "Lingshu, thank you for fetching water today, you should eat more." Glancing quietly at concubine Wang Gui, she whispered, "I've given you more than your mother's." Ji Lingshu blushed and nodded slightly. Concubine Wang Gui naturally saw this scene, but felt that Zhou Daikai was not a bad person. Lingshu and Zhou Daikai were friends. If one day she passed away, Lingshu would not lose her partner in Niudeleng Gong. Thinking of this, she thought that Ji Lingshu had been in this cold palace since he was 2 years old, and that he would probably spend his whole life here in the future, so she couldn't help feeling sad for a while. Holding the bowl and crying, he said, "It's getting cold outside, I'll go home and eat." After distributing the 2 girls, there was not much in the pot. Zhou Dodge didn't care. But he cooked for the 2 of them today, and seeing the scene in the vegetable cellar, he knew that there was really not much food left. This is also a troublesome thing. The night of the full moon is coming soon, he is about to obtain the cultivation technique, and he will definitely increase his appetite by then, so he has to think about it. Once in the cold palace, everything is difficult. After eating, Zhou Dodge went back to the house to rest. Ji Lingshu peeked at him a few times, feeling that this seemed different from the eunuchs he had met before. After eating, he ran to mother's room, and asked with burning eyes, "Mother, is this Zhou Dalu a good person?" Concubine Wang Gui hesitated. There is nothing good without a reason in the world, and Zhou Daikai's goodness always made her feel like she was plotting something wrong, but after going deeper, the reasons given by Zhou Daikai could still stand. Sighing, "Let's just consider him a good person." Ji Lingshu was still young, so he didn't think too much, but continued to ask, "Will the ant still give us meat?" Obviously, Zhou Dodge's dishes today aroused her desire for meat. Concubine Wang Gui's expression tightened, then she looked outside the door, "Keep your voice down. Then will she still deliver meat?" "I don't know either." Ji Lingshu pursed her lips and said nothing. Everything is not as simple as what Zhou Dodge saw. If she eats steamed buns and pickles all day long, no matter how good concubine Wang Gui's skin is, she will not remain like a girl for 10 years. The same is true for Ji Lingshu. The nutrition of pickles cannot be satisfied at all. When a young girl grows up, she should maintain the beauty she deserves, no matter how good Ji Lingshu's background is. Wealth and grace are, after all, raised. Zhou Daikai thought about this question. He naturally understood that concubine Wang Gui had a secret, and although he had never met other concubines in the Lang Palace, he was definitely not as good as concubine Wang Gui's mother and daughter. The contact time is still too short to gain concubine Wang Gui's trust. Suddenly, his expression was slightly stunned, and then anger flashed in his eyes. He had been ignoring one point before. Su Qing arranged him to swim when he stuffed the money. Many court ladies and eunuchs, at this moment, he understood something. Wang Bing and his son must have bought through Su Qing. They understand the nature of the original owner and are arrogant. As long as they arrange themselves in Swime Garden, they will definitely offend the noble concubine, mother and daughter, and then disappear from the world without a trace. No, after Wang Lu fell out of favor, why did he dare to insult the noble concubine? Was the power behind the imperial concubine destroyed? Why did Jilingshu not kill Wang Lu later, but instead made him a 1,000-year-old prince? The water in Lenggong is no shallower than other places in the palace. Zhou Dodge quickly realized this. After lying down for a while, after resting, the bruise in his legs was uncomfortably swollen, and Zhou Dodge got up from the head of the bed. For this kind of injury, it is still necessary to walk appropriately. After all, he has no medical treatment, and walking properly can dissolve the congestion. After leaving the small building, facing the autumn wind, she shrunk her robes and walked slowly. The antique beauty made him dizzy. This is a real ancient pastoral building. It was the first time for him to experience the charm of architecture as he lived in a busy city in his previous life. Unknowingly, he walked out of the arch, through the corridor outside the door, and out of Swime Garden. The outside was empty and the wind became colder. In this palace, he is a eunuch, so naturally he is not allowed to wander around at will, but he was thinking about something in his mind, and he forgot it for a while. The food in Swamiwan, my practice, lifespan. Halfway there, he discovered that there was actually a small lake behind the cold palace, and flowers were blooming beside the lake, and delicate lotus flowers on the surface of the water were puffing out the mist in the lake. Suddenly, his eyes froze, and there seemed to be a person in the center of the lake. She was all white, from her hair to her shoes, and even the sword in her hand. The image can only say that this person is a non-mainstream, but the key lies in his posture, which is actually suspended on the water. Zhou Dodge's eyes were demented, and the picture in Wang Lu's panel was truly displayed in front of him. The man seemed to have seen him too, turned his head slightly, and seemed to nod to him. Zhou Dodge quickly opened his arms and waved. He wanted to see the person's panel, but it seemed that the distance was too far. He didn't see the special sign above his head, but just wrote down the yuanzi behind the person. Ningdan Garden. Rain in the summer of the 15th year of Yuanji was still a little rare, like the whole day of rain that day, it was still very rare. After autumn, it seems that all the rainwater deducted from Dajin in summer will be poured down. It was windy and rainy, and the temperature was even lower. The imperial concubine had already put on Jilingshu's only fox fur, which had begun to shed. This is the mother and daughter, the treasures that have spent the winter in the past. Zhou Daikai still sneaked into the imperial concubine's room while she was taking a bath, and warmed her bed. The imperial concubine came back from washing, she no longer had the strangeness from yesterday, and even felt the temperature in the quilt on her body. Seeing this, Zhou Daikai was about to get up, but the imperial concubine stopped him. Daolu, lie down a little longer, you are finally warm. Concubine Wangui sat on the head of the bed, enduring the howling autumn wind. Zhou Daikai pulled her hand under the quilt. Your Majesty, it's cold outside, put your hand in. He just felt Wang Guifei's hands as cold as ice when she reached into the quilt. The imperial concubine didn't refuse. It's just like this, the posture is unavoidably a little weird, with a heavy chest. Zhou Daikai lay on the bed, looking sincerely, the vertical and horizontal grooves made him lick his lips, but he held back halfway through the licking. The imperial concubine found out that he was a man. Can't imagine that scene. Dalu, you are so beautiful, do you still remember what you did before entering the palace? Your Majesty is really good at joking. How dare you call her pretty in front of the noble concubine? Zhou Daikai replied with a smile, searching the memory of the original body slightly. Before I entered the palace, I remember being a Taoist boy in a Taoist temple. Then how did you enter the palace? Zhou Daikai explained lightly, the sage pardoned the world and released the bandits in the prison. Someone turned into a bandit. My master went to surrender the bandit, but he never came back. Then my senior brother and I fell into the hands of the bandits. I was betrayed. Entered the palace and became a eunuch. After hearing this, concubine Wangui couldn't help feeling pity, and stretched out her hands to hug Zhou Daikai's head. Dalu, you are also a poor man. Zhou Deakai was suppressed by her broad mind, and his voice was muffled. Where is the Empress, who is not a poor person in this cold palace? Yes. Zhou Deakai remembered the white man he saw in the center of the lake today, and said, Mother, do you know who lives in Ningdan Garden? Concubine Wang Gui finally left from Zhou Daji's head. Yu reading www.yuuganshu.com. Zhou Daj was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief, but there was a feeling in his heart that was still unfinished. I don't dare to lick. Ning Danyuan, why did Dalu ask about Ning Danyuan? There seemed to be vigilance in her tone. Zhou Deakai was startled. He didn't want to be vigilant. He hurriedly said, I went out to relax today, and I walked to the lake without knowing it, and saw a tall man floating on the water in the center of the lake. It seems to be Condensing Pill Garden. Concubine Wang Gui kept looking into his eyes, and after he finished speaking, she said, Ningdan Garden is the residence of the former Empress Dowager. She came to accompany the 8th prince. What you saw today should be the 8th prince. The 8th prince? Zhou Daj quickly recalled this person. He once heard the 9th prince say that this is the half-brother of the current emperor. When he was very young, he was displeased by the late emperor because he caught a woman's belly band. Later, he was thrown into limbo because he offended the late emperor. Before the late emperor died, he made his mother's sister the Empress, so his aunt was the Empress Dowager. Calculated, this person's life in the cold palace should have been almost 28 years, right? He suddenly remembered something. The Queen Mother has not been thrown into the cold palace. The Queen Mother was registered as the first emperor 1 year before Emperor Yuanji came to power, but the first emperor respected her very much. After the first emperor left, the Queen Mother took pity on the 8 princes left behind by her sister, and pleaded with the emperor to let him release the 8 princes. Later, I didn't know how to solve it, but according to the 9th prince, it seemed that there was a big quarrel, and then the Empress Dowager moved out of Yuchen Hall, and often came to Lenggong to visit the 8th prince. Zhou Deakai narrowed his eyes slightly. This cold palace is a bit of a crouching tiger, hidden dragon. The Queen Mother, without a doubt, is also a noble person. Coming out of the imperial concubine's room, Zhou Deakai looked unspeakable. Today he suddenly found a thigh comparable to Ji Lingshu's, and his heart was filled with the desire to lick it. This cold palace needs to move around a lot in the future. Could it be that the background behind the mother and daughter of the imperial concubine is the Queen Mother? The 8th prince is a master of cultivation. What about the Queen Mother? Thinking of the 8th prince aroused Zhou Deakai's desire to practice. Tomorrow will be the night of the full moon. I wonder if he can find the opportunity in Wang Lu's second act? On the third night after crossing, he was still tossing and turning in his mind. Waking up again, Ji Lingshu woke up earlier than him this morning, and was already boiling water in the courtyard after he got up. Lingshu, good morning, did you get up so early today? After 2 days, Ji Lingshu was no longer so afraid of him. He didn't run away, but he didn't speak. Lingshu, do you hate eunuchs? Ji Lingshu glanced at him, nodded, and shook his head again. Zhou Deakai felt happy. The little girl was still arrogant. Are you boiling water for the imperial concubine? Hearing him talk about his mother, Ji Lingshu said sullenly, Mother sweats and can't sleep when the seasons change. Boil some water to wipe her body. Zhou Daj couldn't help but said, just let me do it. You need fire to boil water. What will you do if it burns? Ji Lingshu gave him a strange look, but said nothing. Thinking of the method he had originally thought of training Ji Lingshu, Zhou Deakai cleared his throat. I said, leave such things to me in the future, don't you understand? The little girl had a psychological shadow in her childhood, most likely due to PSTD reaction. After Zhou Deakai's voice fell, Ji Lingshu stood up straight and intertwined her 2 little hands. Are you, a bad too? Zhou Daj almost vomited blood. I'm not. Am I not treating you well? No answer was received. After all, Ji Lingshu didn't ask Zhou Deakai to wipe the imperial concubine's body. After all, she knew the imperial concubine well and was not used to others looking at her body. This has only been here for a few days and is not worthy of trust. At noon, Zhou Dodge started cooking again. Looking at the empty vegetable cellar, he sighed again in his heart. Is he really going to use all the wealth that the 9th prince gave him to buy vegetables? But I still made a hearty stew, with plenty of oil and salt. Jilingshu was full of praise, but concubine Wang Gui hesitated to speak. Finally at night, Zhou Daikai, who had already been extremely anxious in his heart, came to the imperial concubine's room early, made the bed, and waited quietly. The silver moon is like a plate, and finally rises. Zhou Dodge got up from the bed, quickly lay down on the ground, and found the somewhat raised floor tile. A ray of moonlight mischievously jumped over the window, illuminating the whole room in white. The strange floor tile was like an ordinary floor tile, reflecting light outward, but Zhou Dodge noticed something. The ray of light reflected by this floor tile pointed at the courtyard at an extremely weird angle. He came to the window to have a look. The southeast corner of Swime Garden is full of plum trees. This kind of plum tree is very large, and its quality is completely different from the previous ones on the earth. The light falls on the 4th plum tree. Zhou Daikai was surprised. Could it be that the exercises are under the tree? Waiting for concubine Wang Gui to come back, chatting with her about family affairs and contacting her, Zhou Daikai went downstairs and waited for concubine Wang Gui to turn off the lights, then rushed to the plum tree garden. The 4th strain. The silver moon is cold and the autumn wind is bitter. Zhou Dodge shuddered, picked up a shovel and started digging. Fortunately, it had just rained and the soil was loose. After digging up a layer of soil, the color of the soil below was completely different from the surface soil. Zhou Dodge understood that he had found the right one. After digging a few more floors, a small box suddenly appeared inside. The material of this box can't be seen, the surface is as black as ink. Under the moonlight, it actually refracts a strange jade light, and on the ceiling part, there is a lifelike carving of a small dragon. Malong. Forward to the totem. Zhou Dodge took a deep breath, looked around like a guilty conscience, first put the black box back in his room, and then came out and covered it with dirt with his hands. From the beginning to the end, he moved very little. Touching the box with excitement, he touched Malong with his hands. When he was young, the original owner had grown up in a Taoist temple. His brother was a Buddha and was very good at unlocking locks. Zhou Daikai recalled the trick, and it wasn't too difficult, so he opened the lock. The contents in the box are very simple and clear at a glance, 3 books with yellowed covers and a small seal. Zhou Dodge didn't go to get the books at the first time, but glanced at the jade seal, and couldn't help but gasp. The previous dynasty, passed on the jade seal of the country? Immediately realized that Chuanguo Yuxi is not so small. He didn't see what it was, he only knew that this thing must not be seen by the second person, otherwise it would be hard to argue. After hiding the seal under the bed and pressing it down with sundries, Zhou Daikai reached out and took out the book. There are 3 books in total. A book of military tactics, Wu Shenfa, a book of exercises, Ziji Beijian, and the last book is about martial arts, with a very strange name, Chrysanthemum Transformation into Extreme Hands. Looking at the last book of martial arts, Zhou Daikai couldn't help twitching the corner of his mouth, his hand turned into a chrysanthemum. Is this martial skill serious? Just ignore the 2 books and open the middle one. Ziji Treasure Mirror, I don't know how many kinds of exercises are considered. Zhou Daikai was so excited that he opened the book slightly. The original owner had read with the prince, so he was naturally literate. There is a line of small characters written vertically on the title page, the big sun is red, the crescent moon is silver, and when they merge together, they become purple. I have forged the Ziji Beijian with my whole life. There is a signature at the bottom, Master Ziji. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Zhou Dodge was excited and continued to flip through the pages of the book. The book is not thick, but it records 2 exercises, one is called De Sun Treasure Book, and the other is Crescent Moon Divine Art. Each page has an extremely complicated diagram of meridians and small characters as dense as mosquitoes and ants. It seems that people who are afraid of learning the exercises are too stupid. On the last page, they can be separated again to form a huge map, which is a map of all the meridians of the human body, marking the various acupoints of the human body, and some the hidden acupoints and meridians discovered by myself. Even every muscle is labeled. It has to be said that this body has other specialties besides specialties. Unexpectedly, he has a photographic memory, and can even instantly draw inferences about the acupoints marked in the exercises in his brain, and correspond to his own body. After just looking at it once, Zodaj closed his eyes, and he remembered it exactly, even the picture and the corresponding annotations were word for word. Looking up again, he confirmed that the candles in the concubine's mother and daughter's room were not lit. Zodaj extinguished the candle, recalled it in his mind, and then put on a posture. It is recorded in the book that the so-called martial arts is to use body training to drive the inner body and give birth to the inner breath, so it is necessary to practice the Great Sun Treasure first. The Great Sun Treasure is divided into 4 layers, corresponding to the first 3 ranks of martial arts. The first level is just an entry level, and each time you enter a level, you can increase your martial arts cultivation by 1 level. It's a pity that today is night, and it's not the best time to practice the Great Sun Treasure. The Great Sun Treasure is named after the Great Sun, so it naturally relies on the sun. The 3 time periods are the best: when the sun is born in the morning, the sun hangs high at noon, and the day is getting late in the afternoon. But it is not absolute, although it depends on the sun, but it is not impossible to practice without the sun. Zodaj closed his eyes slightly, opened his posture. He took a deep breath, then held it. That chi was trapped in his body, and as time passed, it continued to bring him a strong sense of oppression. Silently reciting the exercises, when he was about to get discouraged, he was finally able to control the chi in his body, and slowly passed it into the Jiquan A cup ointment under his armpit. Even though his expression was in a trance, he seemed to turn into that wisp of breath. Enter the epidermis of the physical body, start to temper continuously, start from the Jiquan point, and travel around the body. Mosquito bites constantly on the body, and the feeling of mice moving under the skin. Sweat permeated his whole body unconsciously. Repeatedly, until the wisp of chi was finally vented due to insufficiency. The pain in the physical body also swelled with heat the moment the chi dissipated. Zodaj's face flushed red, but he couldn't relax his mind for a moment, and with all his might, he took another deep breath. Continue to swim all over the body along the various acupoints marked in the book, and the second swim is much faster. Not for a moment. Until this is repeated 36 times. Reached the limit. Zodaj finally opened his eyes. The whole mattress was already soaked, the message of rebellion came from the stomach, the hunger was from the scalp to the soles of the feet, and every inch of his body was expressing hunger to Zodaj, the master. He casually took out a piece of steamed bun from the side and stuffed it into his mouth, slightly suppressing his hunger. The sky is already pale, and the first floor of the Great Sun Treasure has also been entered. But his complexion was even uglier. 36 weeks, nearly 3 hours have passed. Even though it was because the speed of the first small circle was much slower, Zodaj estimated that it would take him 2 hours to run the speed of the 36 small circles. What a concept! According to the records in the exercises, a total of 1086 great cycles are required to practice the exercises and enter the second level. Every 36 small weeks is a big week, which means that from now on, according to the speed of Zodaj's 2-hour one big week, it will take 90.5 days even if he doesn't sleep, eat or drink. Not to mention whether such a desperate effort is possible, but his lifespan is less than 90 days. Damn it! The cultivation aptitude of this body is so much worse than that of Ji Lingshu. Looking at Ji Lingshu's panel before, he went from nothing to rank 8 in 3 months. He thought that even though he was not as good, reaching rank 9 in 3 months should be as easy as pie. Through comparison, I fully understand how exaggerated and terrifying Jilingshu's aptitude is. Waste. This body, apart from being handsome and powerful, is really useless. He had to find another way to increase his cultivation speed. Zhou Daji's eyes revealed deep thoughts. The pressure of life made him understand that he had to make a change. Looking at the permission to view other people's panels in the game panel, he understood that this was the only solution. There are two people in his heart, one is the 8th prince, and the other is the Queen Mother. These two people must have a secret. The 8th prince is a cultivator, and the Queen Mother probably is too. I don't know if I can find that glimmer of life on the panel of the two. Without getting up, Zhou Daikai continued to cross-legged while taking advantage of the dawn of the sky, and continued to practice the exercises for a big circle. After 2 big weeks, apart from being hungry, he could clearly feel the heat and slightly increased strength in his body. The first birth of the Great Sun is indeed the best cultivation period in the records of the exercises. It only takes more than half an hour to run a great circle, which is extremely fast. Left road. Left road. Mother, is Zhou Dalu dead? Shall we have meat tonight? Don't talk nonsense. Jilingshu's unscrupulous voice sounded in his ears. Left Dodge opened his eyes. Jilingshu was squatting beside him, one hand had just been removed from the bottom of his nose, excitement was shining on her thin face. Concubine Wangui stood at the door and was looking at his lying flat body. Ah! You're awake! Jilingshu hid behind Concubine Wangui as she spoke, her face was a little uneasy, wondering if Zhou Daikai had heard what she said just now. Zhou Daikai didn't seem to have heard what Jilingshu said. He stood up as if nothing had happened, and nodded to the imperial concubine, Your Majesty, are you hungry? The little one went to bed late last night and didn't wake up this morning, which has caused you two to worry. Concubine Wangui sized him up, wondering if he really hadn't heard Jilingshu's words. Her face was still graceful and her temperament was still gentle. It's good to get up, Dalu, you should have a good rest in the future. Thank you, ma'am, for your concern. Concubine Wangui glanced at his body again, as if she still hadn't made up her mind. Zhou Dodge finished his work, cooked a meal for the two of them, and swallowed several steamed buns. This practice method is really good. After practicing it all night, I felt refreshed this morning, my eyes and ears were clear, and even the blood on my knees disappeared a lot. Although he had obtained the method of cultivation, he was fully aware of the disparity in aptitude between himself and Jilingshu, and he had to continue doing the job of warming the imperial concubine's bed. After a few days, the imperial concubine got used to sleeping in the blanket that smelled like him. For several days in a row, Zhou Daikai's practice became faster and faster, and he could run 9 big circles a day, but it was still too late to enter the next level of cultivation before the end of his lifespan. Unable to sit still any longer, he planned to go to the Ningdan garden on the other side of the lake to see the 8th prince and the Queen Mother, looking for opportunities. Both belong to the limbo, and these two people should be within the scope of the script. He was thinking about getting out of Swime Garden, when several eunuchs and court ladies walked towards him. The eunuchs were wearing a suit of eunuchs wearing black and green wild geese, which was the costume of inspecting eunuchs. Only then did Zhou Daikai recall that the eunuchs were inspected for a small inspection every 3 days and a large inspection every 7 days. On the day he first arrived in the Lang Palace, he had just experienced a large inspection. The leader was an old and a nanny about 40 years old. They bumped into Zhou Daikai Hiden. The old nanny looked Zhou Daikai up and down, and then said, "You are the new Xiaolu, right? I heard Mr. Su say that there is a new clever person here in Swamiwan. Now that I see you, I know why Xiaoluzi was liked by the sage and the 9th prince." Reading www.yukansha.com. Zhou Daikai didn't know who the person in front of him was, but judging by his clothes, he should be a rank higher than him. He could be regarded as an old nanny who had entered the rank. He just smiled and said, "Are you here for inspection? Please come in, the Empress is here in the garden." On the contrary, they glanced at the two of them, and then said, "Grandma Qing, let's start early, there are still a few gardens behind." This is of the same rank as that King Mao. Eunuchs and maids of course also have grades, which can be regarded as a special internal servant system. The highest is the third rank chief executive, and the lowest is the current status of Zodiakai, a junior who does not enter the rank. Nanny nodded to Zodiakai, and walked inside with the two maids. The old slowed down a bit. It's a bit of a feat to be able to live after offending Mr. Wang, but... Zodiakai looked at him without saying a word. He understood that most of this person was Wang Bing's man. His hands were really long enough. Even in this secluded place, there were eunuchs licking dogs. Seeing that Zodiakai ignored him, the old led the two people behind him to the courtyard. "Xiao Luzi, you have been in Swimmay Garden for a few days, why is it still so dirty inside? Do you think that the Lang Palace is not an imperial palace, but like a common people's courtyard?" That was when he cooked porridge for the concubine and concubine this morning, and spilled some sundries, which he hadn't had time to clean up. Zodiakai understood that the old was deliberately embarrassing himself, but he had no choice but to say, "My father-in-law taught me that I must clean more frequently in the future." Naturally, the old would not let him go so easily, and continued to speak, "The sage makes clear rewards and punishments. If this is the case, then I will punish you for 1 month's salary." Zodaj squeezed his fist and didn't speak. The old fined Zodiakai 1 month's salary, then ignored him and led the people straight to the small building. Left Dodge followed to see. At this moment, the green nun no longer spoke softly to Zodiakai at all, she was bowing her head to admonish concubine Wang Gui. "Yes, you are not mistaken. An old court lady is reprimanding the imperial concubine, which is naturally impossible in the palace, but this is the cold palace. Wan Ling Long, you don't think that everything will be fine if you enter the cold palace, do you? You have memorized a small record of keeping virginity for 10 years, but you still can't answer it fluently. You must know that the cold palace will not keep you forever. Idlers! Cut off half of your Swimmay Garden's next expenses." Zodiakai had seen the so-called record of Xiao Zhen, it was in the imperial concubine's room, it was as thick as a Xinhua dictionary. But when he thought that the imperial concubine could not memorize it for 10 years, Zodiakai secretly thought, this seemingly golden concubine is really stupid. However, the imperial concubine is his noble person, so he naturally did not want her to be scolded, so he was about to speak. "But I heard the old say, you don't need to be angry, the imperial concubine knows the rules now, right, Empress imperial concubine?" His voice was joking, it was already an unspoken rule to cooperate with the maids and blackmail these concubines in the cold palace. Concubine Wang Gui's complexion changed slightly. She naturally knew the greed of these low-level people in the palace, but she had no money. A few days ago, because the last nun bullied Ji Lingshu, the concubine who couldn't bear it bought the life of that nun with money. The money from her natal family hadn't been delivered yet, so she didn't expect that the two most greedy guys in front of her would be the ones in this inspection. "Give it a few days, you two, there is no money left in the garden." As soon as concubine Wang Gui begged, Zodiakai knew that something was wrong. How could these two greedy brats let go of such a good opportunity to blackmail? Sure enough, when the old lady listened to this, her eyes narrowed slightly, and a hook was raised at the corner of her mouth, like a falcon that was about to hunt. Concubine Wang Gui showed panic. "You, what do you want?" Qing Momo said at this time, "Lingshu is your lifeblood, Empress, so naturally we won't move, but Empress." The two people behind her stepped forward, as if they were going to search the body, but the posture was not quite like it. Concubine Wang Gui had never encountered such a posture, she tried her best to resist, and the two young eunuchs behind the old also stepped forward to help, even wanting to remove the concubine's clothes in public. Zodaj couldn't bear it anymore. You are presumptuous. Is there any king's law in your eyes? Is there a saint? Sister Qing squinted her eyes and looked at Zhou Dodge. Xiao Luzi, I thought you were pretty, and I wanted to promote you, but I didn't expect you to contradict my envoy for the sake of disposing of my concubine. You really ate the heart of a leopard. The old said with a smile, Grandma, I told you a long time ago that you have offended Mr. Wang by this small way, and you still have to take him back. We have seen this kind of person a lot, and he only has that face. It's worth a little, I like it, and when he dies in a few days, our family will have his face cut off for you and send it over. The Lang Palace is really too biased. It is said that since the founding of the Great Jin dynasty, no emperor has ever visited the Lang Palace. I don't know how many concubines and princes were killed here, and the emperor has never been seen. These people are already confident. Zhou Dodge stared at the old eunuch. Your father-in-law knows my identity. The old chuckled lightly, oh? You are a slave, what other status do you have? Tell our family to hear it. It seems that my father-in-law really doesn't know what I used to do. Although I smashed the saint's porcelain and entered this cold palace, but as the 9th prince's companion to the schoolboy, the saint allowed the 9th prince to take me away when he was serving filial piety in Beijing 3 years later. Go, if I want to kill a few people at that time, I think the 9th prince will agree. The old stayed in Lenggong for many years, and the news had long since been blocked. He only knew that Zhou Daikai not only offended the saint, but even Wang Binji's son Wang Lu came to Lenggong himself to torture Zhou Daikai. But he didn't expect Zhou Dodge to have such a background. He knew about the 9th prince, the emperor's youngest son, the most favored, the latest to join the feudal clan. The old looked at Zhou Daikai's face, his expression changed. Wang Lu didn't tell him that Zhou Delu still had this background. If what Zhou Delu said was true, then he wouldn't be able to offend the 9th prince. Sister Qing interjected at this time, with a smile brewing in the creases on her face, I never thought that eunuch Zhou would have such a relationship with the 9th prince. I hugged the 9th prince before I entered the cold palace. It really is a big flood to the Dragon King temple. Since eunuch Zhou is here, let's go to the next one as the king's master, and eunuch Zhou will tell the imperial concubine how to do it. The old was cautious, weighing the pros and cons in his mind, and understood that Wang Lu and Zhou Daikai's affairs were beyond his control, so he borrowed the donkey to go downhill, and said with a smile, what King Mao said is right, I will do as you say. Ji Lingshu never came out of the house from the beginning to the end. She was soft on the outside and strong on the inside. She had offended the inspecting before, and concubine Wang Gui refused to let her out every time. At this time, seeing the group of people leaving, he walked out from the corridor on the 2nd floor, still holding a wooden stick in his hand. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Concubine Wang Gui walked to Zhou Daikai and took his hand, thanks to Xiao Luzi today. What did the Empress say? The younger one said that every time I see the Empress, I think of my mother who has never met before. Naturally, I can't bear to see my mother being humiliated in front of me. Pay attention to the look of this noble concubine. As expected, the imperial concubine's face was touched. She has been in this cold palace for so many years, and she has long been used to the warmth and coldness of people. Ling Shu just held Zhou Dodge in his arms, good boy. Leaving the warm and soft embrace of the imperial concubine, watching the imperial concubine twist her hips and go upstairs to find Ji Lingshu. Zhou Dodge's eyes turned cold again. Power. The scene just now made his desire for power grow stronger and stronger. Just now he could frighten off the inspecting who was showing off his might in the cold palace. As long as he has power, all the problems that bother him, including Swamiwen's problems, can be easily solved. It doesn't even take much power. Zhou Daikai made a decision in his mind, got up quickly, and walked outside Swime Garden. He is going to try to contact the 8th prince and even the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother has not been deposed, but he likes to stay in the cold palace to accompany the 8th prince. As long as the Queen Mother nods, he can easily gain part of the power in the cold palace. He was distracted all the way, and walked in a hurry, and unknowingly came to Ningden Garden. Before passing through the arch, he felt a sharp air, but his whole body was covered with hairs, as if there was a peerless beast roaring at him in the garden. Thanks for watching, please subscriber. Zodiacai's whole heart was shocked, and he stopped immediately. After a while, the sharpness decreased a lot, and he raised his steps again and stepped into the condensed alchemy garden. Ningden Garden is at least 3 times the size of Swime Garden. There is also a large garden in the front yard. In the open space in the middle, a white-haired young man is sitting cross-legged, with a snow-white sword floating in front of him. It was the person floating in the middle of the lake that I saw yesterday. It was getting closer today. When Zodiacai saw this person again, he immediately thought of another person in his heart. Sword God Ximen Fuxu. He likes to wear white clothes at ordinary times, with a stern face and aloof nature. When I saw this person for the first time, I knew that he was already extremely fond of swords. In his eyes, there was nothing but a sword in his eyes. The 8th prince just opened his eyes and glanced at Zodiacai, then closed his eyes again, as if Zodiacai didn't attract his attention. Just for a moment before closing his eyes, there was a flash of surprise. Zodaj didn't notice the surprise. He swallowed all the original Streetcube skills and reorganized the language. Such a character, I think it is worth using one permission to view his script. Name, Zigudeo status, supporting role in the script of Lenggong achievements of supporting roles, Sword God in White, Yujian Zhenbai Sai, going to 9 heavens. The plot of the first act, Ji Gudeo was originally named Ji Hoxiang, but was disliked by Emperor Wen of Jin, so he lost his imperial status and changed his name to Ji Xiang. Sword. The fate of the Jin dynasty was unstable, and Emperor Yuanji ignored the government for several years, seeking pleasure all day long, indulging in opera, and there were many evildoers. Zigudeo slashed demons with his sword. In the autumn of the 15th year of Yuanji, an evil spirit sneaked into the cold palace of the imperial city, wanting to find the treasures of the previous dynasty, and secretly fascinated the Queen Mother Zi, who was discovered by Zigudeo and died by a sword by the lake. As a gift to a friend, the scene of killing evil with a sword was seen by Su Qing, the head of the cold palace, and passed into the ears of Emperor Yuanji. Emperor Yuanji didn't care, but Zhang Wei's Hung, the first assistant of the great Jin dynasty, made an appointment with him after hearing the news. After that, Zigudeo left Lenggong and went to the southeast to slay demons. The second act of the plot, check the script in advance, need to consume life. Zodaj took a deep breath and bet right, there really is a chance. But he did not leave just now. It is now the 15th year of Yuanji, just a few days into autumn, and it is not far from the day when Zigudeo was signaled by Emperor Yuanji. With a respectful face, he took out a few banknotes from his bosom. The little 9th prince accompanied me to Zodalu and met the 8th prince. The sword in white didn't seem to hear his words, and sat cross-legged on the spot as before. The other side. Swime Garden welcomed a guest today, Pixia with a crown and fire phoenix gown. Her grace is even more graceful than that of concubine Wangui, and the magnanimity on her face is far beyond. It can be seen that she has been in a high position for a long time, and her imposing manner completely suppressed concubine Wangui. But concubine Wangui stubbornly raised her head. Without saying a word, she just bit her lip and looked at the person coming. Ji Lingshu looked happy. Auntie, are you here to deliver meat to us? The person who came was not alone, followed by several young eunuchs and court ladies. She stepped forward with a smile, and touched Ji Lingshu's head. Little Shuer, is she being good lately? Do you miss your mother? I've thought about it, I can't sleep because I think about my aunt. Haha, do you want the big mother, or the big mother's flesh? The Queen Mother Zi continued to ask, pinching Ji Lingshu's cheek. Think about it all. Empress Dowager Zi's face is exquisite, her facial features are like sculptures, from top to bottom, she is extremely beautiful, Her figure is also extremely good, her sense of temptation is somewhat better than that of concubine Wangui. But the beauty of her and concubine Wangui are two different extremes. The beauty of concubine Wangui is obsessive, at a glance, I just want to indulge in it and feel tolerance. But the Empress Dowager Zi was different. Her beauty was more aggressive. She came from a rich family in Yandi, and the Yan people were tough. She also had a wild beauty that made people want to conquer unconsciously. Or be conquered by her. Jilingshu let the Empress Dowager Zi pinch her face and spoke loudly, but there was a trace of disgust hidden deep in her eyes. It's not that she doesn't understand anything, all the innocence is all disguised, she knows the suffering her mother has suffered for her, and she also knows the insults her mother suffers every time the Queen Mother comes to deliver meat, but she still pretends to be innocent. The appearance is to satisfy the Queen Mother, but also not to make the mother worry. Old witch, one day, I will cut off your limbs and put you in a jar. The Queen Mother patted her on the shoulder and put two small boxes in her arms, go and play, I will tell your mother something. Then he turned his head and said to his subordinates, you all go down too. No one is allowed to come in without the order of Ijia. Yes. Jilingshu gritted her teeth, put the box aside, held her mother's hand, and comforted her in a low voice. She has always disliked her eldest mother, and every time her eldest mother left, her mother would lose her mind, sometimes her face would turn red, and her condition would be very bad. But mother loves to eat meat, and also likes to watch her eat meat. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. As long as she eats meat, mother will soon be happy again. Before leaving, she once again glanced at the Queen Mother Zi with complicated eyes. After everyone left, the Queen Mother Zi couldn't wait to drag concubine Wangui upstairs, glanced at her bed, sniffed it with her nose, and frowned, Ling Long, why does your bed smell like a man? Embarrassment flashed across concubine Wangui's face, she didn't want to speak at first, but she was defeated by the aggressive eyes of the Empress Dowager Zi, and said in a low voice, there is a new father-in-law in the garden, he is very nice, he knows that I am not in good health, warm my bed every day. The Queen Mother Zi sneered, didn't expect that you, Wan Ling Long, who are so proud, would have a day to eat with eunuchs? I'm a little curious about what kind of eunuchs can fascinate you so much. Concubine Wangui stopped talking. Suddenly a new set of quilts appeared in the hands of Empress Dowager Zi, and she removed concubine Wangui's quilts. The imperial concubine's complexion turned redder, and her fair skin almost turned into a boiled lobster. She pursed her lips and started to move. The Empress Dowager Zi looked eager to try. She had found several forbidden books in the harem in recent days, and the contents recorded in them could be tried today. Pure. Although the Queen Mother Zi reprimanded her, she was still very gentle on the couch, but she... Unknowingly, she thought of Queen Zi's fingers in her mind, and as her mind fluttered, she thought of all kinds of fingers. Before that, Queen Zi continued to tease her about eating with the eunuch. Inexplicably, he thought of Zhou Daji's mouth and his slender hands. His face became redder, even emitting heat, and even his neck became red. Seeing this scene, the Queen Mother Zi touched her body lovingly. You and I are poor people.